Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Herbert Smith. Thank you all for coming. Now, I have a very sad story I'm about to tell you guys. Sad story for myself, sad story for my wife, my friends and family, and for 4 young teenagers. Now, before I begin that story, I'm going to introduce myself first. Like I said, Herbert Smith. I was born June 29th of 1917. I grew up here in Fairland with my parents, Robert and Ruby Smith. I had 2 brothers, Raymond and Winston, and then I had a sister, Winifred Smith Keller. Like I said, we all grew up in Fairland, graduated from Fairland School. Once I graduated there, I went up to Indianapolis for a job, worked at the International Harvester. After working there, I ended up meeting my wife, Virginia Trees, and I ended up marrying her on September 17th of 1940. The year after that, 1941 in November, I ended up joining the Indiana State Police. I was first assigned to the Seymour Post, and then after several years, I ended up transferring to the Connersville Post, where I worked in Shelby County in April of 1946. Like I said before, I continue on with this sad story. I'll let this gentleman introduce himself real quick.
Thank you, Smith. My name is Charles Longstreet. I'm buried here with my wife, Helen, but you can call me Preach. You'll never know why I got that nickname. Okay, maybe you will. But I had a stillborn son who lived for 3 days, and he's buried there in the back. And then I would adopt a son as well, who's alive to this day, but I'm giving him this son. So I was born in 1912 in Adams, Indiana. And then I would attend St. Paul High School. In 1936, I would marry my bride, Helen Trees. And if you're paying attention, the same last name as his one. So we became brother-in-laws. Now I had a brother who passed before me, and I would have a brother that would survive me. So when I gained in Smitty, I gained a brother-in-law and a brother. And so we made it a family thing, so I joined the police force after he did in 1945. And my first post was down in Charlestown, Indiana, down south. And then in 1946, I would transfer to Connersville Post, right here with Smitty, in 1946. Now Connersville covered Shelby County, Rush County, and Hancock County. We had a much broader area to patrol back then because there's only so many troopers. There's only about 23 of us for the whole area, and only about 120 or so for the whole state. Just keep in mind, the state police didn't form until 1933, so we're only about 15 years into this. And when it originally started, we didn't even have uniforms. We drove our own cars, and we got paid about $85 a month. Some of you probably make a little more than that today. Not much. About 86. So, but as I mentioned, and people didn't like to ride with me. I tend to drive really slow, and I also give out warnings. If I saw you once, I'll give you a warning. But if we met twice, you can't. You know. So, but it was 1946. I rejoined Smitty at the Connersville Post, and I let him take it back over to that fateful year.
Like I said, this is a very sad story. It's December 5th, 1946. My family still lived up in Fairland, so I went up there, had lunch with them. You see, my dad was very sick. Very sick. We were very afraid that he wouldn't make it through the night. So every day that we had with them was a blessing in and of itself. So I went up there, spent some time with them, ate lunch. Once it was over, I was going to start heading out, but then I saw my niece, Betty Parker. She was going to walk to school. It's the middle of December. It's a cold day. I said, go on, hop on in. Betty Parker right up there in the white. So jump on in, jump in, I'll take you to school. So I dropped her off, and then I decided to head up to US 52 and State Road 9. That's just the north side of the county. Decided to see what's going on up there. Well, I see a vehicle make an illegal U-turn, so I go ahead and stop him. And then red flags started popping up. I noticed that when I got the ID of the driver, the other 3 in the car didn't have any identification. And they were 4 teenagers, 2 boys and 2 young girls. And they couldn't really tell me where they got the car at. So there was a lot of red flags. Start feeling a little suspicious. So back then, what we would do, we'd take them back down to the Shelbyville Police Department and hash things out, figure out what's going on. So I told them, go ahead and follow me. We'll head down State Road 9 to the police department, and we'll see what it goes from there. So we start heading down that way, south State Road 9. Once we got to the area where Country Club Heights is today, it wasn't there back then, it was all fields. I see them in my rearview mirror pull over to the side of the road. I'm thinking, well, they must have some kind of car trouble. So I go ahead and back up my commission all the way in front of their car. Go ahead and step out, start walking back. Once I get to the rear tire of my car, I see in their window the barrel of a gun pointed right at me. I drop down, I hear gunshots being fired at me. I draw my own pistol. My tire ends up getting shot. I return fire, but then I feel a tremendous pain in my chest. I remember crawling back into my car and attempting to radio for help, but I passed out and I died. So preach, what happened after that?
About that same time, another vehicle is coming down 9. A man and his son, they just left a business meeting. And they see these 4 young teenagers making a run for it through the field. So Smitty, they came upon you, and the son came and held you in, and your last breath was taken in his arms, while the father did reach for your radio and called in. And so immediately the law enforcement was able to engage, and within an hour, this entire situation would be contained. Also, an airplane took flight from the Chevrolet Airport to get visibility on where these teams were running. The word is spreading quickly. Not only do more law enforcement arrive, but even the farmers themselves grab their shotguns and their own firearms, and they begin to create a perimeter to apprehend these 4 teenagers. These teenagers, the 2 boys are 17 years of age, and the girls are 15 and 14 respectively. Very young. And they attempted to run, but as they can see that they're being followed by air as well, as Smitty mentioned, it's December, so they take cover trying to use the brush of the corn stalks and whatnot to kind of create some cover. It didn't work. As the perimeter was able to close in on them, and they apprehended them. I took the shooter into my vehicle, and then each other officer took one of the other teenagers separate in their vehicles. And the reason that they ran is because Smitty's his firing did disable their vehicle. That's why they were not able just to drive off. So once we had them apprehended, we took them to Indianapolis to get a statement, and they confessed to all things. And then a trial would take place in Bartholomew County, and that's where they would serve their initial term. And the jury found them guilty on first-degree murder. But when the sentencing came, the girls were assigned voluntary manslaughter, and they were getting the shorter sentence of between 2 and 21 years of service of jail time. They would serve that time in a, as you guys would call it, like a juvenile type situation, and then they would be let go. One of the gals passed away in 1999. The other one remains alive to this day. The shooter, he was sentenced with manslaughter, and he would be sentenced to life up in jail. And Smitty, you'd be glad to know that he never saw the outside of jail again. And he passed away in 1985 behind bars in Michigan City. The other gentleman was actually a private of our military, and he was on leave that weekend and just chose not to return. So technically he was AWOL at this point. Smitty, you also know that your life was not wasted, as these teams were criminals. This was about the 3rd vehicle that they had stolen. One of the vehicles that they had stolen in Evansville, Indiana, contained this .38 caliber. That's how they acquired the weapon that would ultimately give the fatal shot. But as I mentioned, all 4 were captured. The shooter would serve his time, and justice was served. So thank you, Smitty, for protecting and serving our community. And just thank you guys for hearing Herb's story. And remember to continue to support your law enforcement officers. And thank you guys for coming out.
One last thing, Preach. I gotta know, how did my father take my passing?
As you mentioned, Smitty, your father was also in ill health. And actually 4 months after your passing, he would pass away too. But out of respect for your father, they didn't want to break his heart, and they wanted him to burden him with the news. So they actually told him that you were serving a post up in northern Indiana, and that explained your absence and why you weren't coming around.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming.
We
appreciate it.